Hello, this is Clarence Moye with Awards Daily here with Dan Trachtenberg and Amber Midthunder, the director and the star of Hulu's Prey, a prequel to the Predator series, which I recently watched for the first time. I just finally got around to it and I absolutely loved it. Surprising. It's a very surprising film. I think it's incredibly intelligent and it gives you different perspectives that I don't think I expected from a Predator series. So congratulations to both of you. I loved it.
Oh, thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. So I'm so glad you watched it.
Well, yeah, I mean that would be like table stakes for an interview, right? So tell me, to both of you, whoever wants to answer first, what is it about this project and about this script for Prey that attracted you? Amber, why don't we
Uh,
start with you?
yeah,
Oh, me.
I concocted the project in this script,
I
so
was gonna say.
Okay,
uh,
well there you
Uh,
go. So
yeah.
I didn't know that it was a Predator movie. I had not read the script when I engaged with it for the first time. It came to me in a very
Mm.
conventional way of like, we were just talking about this. I don't even remember self-taping for it the first time, but it exists. Uh, and really, I think it was just that I had a really good connection, I think, with the material, even though it was super limited. I think it just, there's something that just felt really right about when I like stepped into that skin. And then meeting with Dan, I mean, even over Skype, which was the first time we ever met before Zooming was cool. This was pre-pandemic. I think that we had a really good like ecosystem of like working together and talking together. And that was, I think that stuff was compelling for me. And I did have a lot of questions about like, what is the movie? And obvious questions. But those things I think really did. I think they felt right and they were very attractive to me.
so Dan, you concocted the project. Why did you concoct this iteration, this revisiting of the Predator myth?
It was a few things that I was swirling in. So on the one hand, I really was hell bent on making an action movie where the story would be primarily told through action. Super inspired by movies like Fury Road,
Mm.
and Gravity, actually, and like, oh, is there a way that we can, you know, have a real thrill ride? But I didn't want it to just be a visceral experience. I was really like, is there any way that could be super emotional as well? And I am not an athlete and do not watch sports, but I love sports movies. And particularly underdog stories are straight to my heart. So I started thinking about, man, if there's a way to take the engine of a sports movie, of an underdog story, and inject that into a thrill ride, we might really be firing on all cylinders. And so in thinking about underdog stories, is there any way, what's a protagonist that we've never seen on screen, as the lead of a movie, and thought very quickly of Native American, and then more to the point, Comanche, who just so often had been relegated to playing the sidekick, or the
Mm.
villain, never the hero. And so I just was smitten with the idea that you could have an experience as an audience member rooting for both the character and the actor, like, oh my god, what a moment for this person and for this culture and for the character. It's real rousing, rise to the occasion thing. So all those things came together, I guess, in thinking, and sci-fi, period, and sci-fi, that combination we so rarely see. And I was really excited to dive into, and thinking of underdog story and this one in particular, thought, well, who can the nemesis be? And then went to that one who is also um, very anti-underdog, and very much looking for who is the strongest, who is the alpha of the planet. So it became a Predator movie.
So with this series or with this film, were you able to sort of identify or build a cinematic language of your own, or were you tapping into things? I mean, obviously some things are known about the Predator, the way that they see the heat in villains, but because of the 1700s setting, were you able to sort of build this completely visually separate from anything else that came before it?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. It was really a combination of things. On the one hand, interestingly, both me and my cinematographer, frequent collaborator Jeff Cutter, are very inspired by John McTiernan in general. When we did Pinnacle River Lane, we quite often referenced Die Hard and Hunt for Red October. And so Predator is certainly in that canon of movies that were very inspiring to us visually. The way that John McTiernan moves the camera, I'm always very taken by, and often in moments reference cinematically in anything I've done. But in this movie, I think I was really attracted to, and I know your question is not just visually, but also just other, sort of film grammar
Mhm.
and franchise grammar, let's say. And I but visually, I love the idea of being in nature, but still feeling a very sure authorial hand guiding you through. Sometimes when we're in movies that are largely outdoors, throw a wide angle lens on and you make it feel a little more documentary-ish, and or either or. And I really was taken by the idea of feeling like we're more in a more composed character story, and sometimes horror film, sometimes action film, less reliant on the docu sensibility. Um, and Predator, I think, does sometimes feel like it's quite often handheld
Mhm.
and less composed. So there's some great shots in that movie. And so in that way we were different, and then but we still wanted to embrace things like heat vision, and all the things that you expect to see in a Predator film, but with the light going back to this time period, we were able to do so specifically with the Predator design. It allowed us to be, on the one hand, giving an audience just what the original Predator film did. Where, if you remember, when we saw OG Predator, we had no idea what that creature was going to be. And you saw the cloaked version, and we were like, "Oh, is that this Predator that I've heard is happening in this movie?" And I saw bits in the trail. And then it decloaks, and you see with that gnarly helmet. You're like, "Oh, that's the alien Predator in this movie. Oh, cool." And then it takes that helmet off, and you see that gnarly face, and you go, "Oh no, that's it." And it surprises you every time, like that's what they're up against. And ever since then, we hadn't really been given that. So now in this movie, by being a little different and
Mhm.
changing the design of the creature a little bit, we were then able to give that same surprise that we got from the original film, and be surprised by the way its cloak looks, be surprised by the way it looks with its mask, now embracing the much more of the trophy hunting sensibility of the creature and making it a bone mask. um, and then of course its final form in the end, its face is I think a little bit scarier and just a little bit different. So
Can
Yeah.
confirm scarier.
So this is either one of the or the only interview where you're both sitting there together. So
yeah.
I'm going to put you both on the spot, and I'll start with you, Amber.
Okay.
Amber, what is it about Dan as a director that allowed you to come onto this project and put your trust and faith in him
Yeah.
to, orchestrate you through this film?
Nothing. He was the biggest boil on this movie. um, no, I think that uh he is, it's so funny because I always say in interviews, like, I throw so much of the compliments onto him when he's not there, which
Mhm.
feels weird because it feels like I'm his fan. But then also it's funny because we've never done this together, so it feels weird to talk about you when you're right here. um he's got this amazing ability to, I mean, first of all, he's just a nice human being. And I think he's really, you know, done me a disservice in realizing that people can be kind and also talented. And now that's the only people that I want to work with are
Mm.
people who are just real, actual good people and also incredible at their given field. So he's got that quality, which I think is really obvious from the first time you meet him, that he just feels like a real person that you can talk to, and that, you know, gives importance to what everybody has to say and is like
Mhm.
actually open to collaboration. And at the same time, he has this amazing ability, I think, which was great for this movie, is, and I think is an amazing skill in general, is to hold the whole story in every single capacity all the time and then zoom into any particular moment, which for this movie was important because, you know, we were on location for like 90% of it, all outside, like all of the movie except for 1 week. And the environment was constantly so stimulating that for me, the challenge was to connect myself and the way that I was like stimulated or excited or whatever I was feeling with my environment on that day, and make sure that I had the right concoction of feelings for the character for the moment.
Mhm.
Despite however, because that's what the movie is. It's so elemental, and it's because it's so nonverbal. It is really about like the ways in which I was interacting with what was around me, which might have been different than what Nadu was doing, but that's almost a harder thing to, because that's not, you're not manipulating your emotions. You're actually just interacting with what is in front of you. Um, and Dan had this great way of being kind of really grounding in those situations where no matter what was happening, I think we could kind of just like make eye contact, and it was through, short sentences or even just kind of a look that I think would anchor both of us into the scene and the moment, and really dialed into like what we needed to do. And he was able to connect it to like, remember this scene is important because it connects to this scene later, which we either have or haven't done, and kind of pick it up, kind of like pick up the movie and like hold it in this way that uh anything story wise was accessible at any moment, no matter what was going on physically, emotionally, or what we had or hadn't shot.
Hmm. Interesting.
Excellent answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, similar question for you.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's coming.
Sounds good. Yeah.
What is it about Amber that made you realize that she was Noru?
Oh God, it's so hard to figure that
It's
out.
awful.
Yeah, my
I was just the
gosh.
only option.
Can you ask me later? No, I actually before coming down here, I where we are recording this, I decided to look and scroll back as far as I could. I typed in Amber's name on my phone and scrolled back as far as I could, to find the first email that I wrote to the casting director about her. And to paraphrase, I was like, she's on another level. We should be so lucky. I can't even express over email, how great. And on the one hand, exactly what she said about me, that I tend to, in every area I possibly can, prefer working with well-intended, good-hearted people. And I think that often trumps talent. That you can be the most talented person in the world, but if there isn't a good working relationship, then that talent won't even be well fulfilled. And so I quite quickly not only sensed how cool she is and how good of a person she is, to put it plainly, but also very grounded, very down to earth, and I really, especially when you're making art, that wants to have import. I long for people that are able to speak very plainly and like get to the root of it, and certainly like, how was this, especially performance wise, like you always go like, but how is this really? That's what allows us to get to a place that hasn't been portrayed yet, because we're saying, well, we've seen this kind of thing in a movie before, but how is it really? And I think you're like that way performance wise, of like, I'm gonna give the real honest version of whatever this is. And I long for that as a director. I want us to always try to attack something like, what's the real, how is it really this way?
That's so interesting. We've never talked about that, but I do think about that a lot.
Yeah, and I can it's always been, yeah, a thing that I gravitate towards. And she obviously has that immensely. And then I've mentioned before, but when we did an audition with her, even though I sort of knew it ahead of time, and she just helped me prove it to be the case to everyone else that needed to see it. She delivered, did auditioned in English, and in Comanche, which is challenging when that's not your first language,
Not my language.
or anyone's language, and non-verbally. And it was a dialogue scene performed without words, and it was incredible. It really was a very moving experience, seeing her very off the cuff, was not rehearsed, swift.
That was a key moment for both of us. I think that was
Yeah.
also because he came to me and he was like, listen, I have an idea and I don't, it might be awful. And I was like, okay, perfect. That was just like the best way to start a sentence for me. And I think we both understood, and I think we had through the movie, the locations were so challenging that
Mhm.
we often were not near each other. So I think in a normal environment, when you really feel like you're partners, I think our partnership was shaped differently than other people because just even physically we could not be near each other to speak. So there was a lot of, I think we developed really quickly from that day, from the first day we ever met, a shorthand, which was very like, we did that scene and then he came out and he just kind of like nodded at me and I was like, and he was like, that was, and I was like, right, that, and he was like, yeah, that, I was like, okay, cool. And that was kind of how we did the whole movie together.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love the physicality of your performance. I mean, Naru is a very tough individual, but it must have been so refreshing and interesting to play a character who changes through the film. That she is not she is a warrior at heart, but maybe not physically yet. You know, she grows and she learns and she trains and experiences all kinds of things that do change her throughout the film. It must have been incredibly fun and rewarding to play Naru that way.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it's exciting to me, I think, to be able to play this role. And it was also, I think that was what made it really frightening for me, to be honest, because there was such a big responsibility in that. Because this is, I think, the first like indigenous female action hero
Mhm.
ever. And so I think that level of importance of like the representation element
Of course.
was, I think, just so that was like my biggest focus, and that was, I think, the biggest responsibility that I felt of wanting to be able to honor that and deliver that. And that really is where that comes from for her. You know, she is like Comanche people were and are still so strong, and have been great warriors. And I think just honoring that, and then honoring that at large, and then finding her, I think, individual journey and her individual identity of going like, okay, in this moment, you know, what is driving her, and like, why does she feel the need to do this, and where is she going, and kind of really um exploring that on, you know, like an intimate one-to-one mindset level, just like me thinking with the character, was a really interesting like undertaking. And then all that stuff, that the conversations we have, or the things that I discover, you know, we didn't get an opportunity most of the time to express that with words. So then it was also a lot of conversations about like, okay, how do we tell a story through the action and
Mhm.
through the physicality. I mean, we had so many conversations about like, how does she carry herself? How does she walk in this scene? Is it, you know, is it kind of, is it more timid? Is it really strong? Like those kinds of things, which I think are the most interesting when you're talking about action. I think action for the sake of action is, can be really impressive, can be kind of boring at some point. And, you know, telling a story with your body, or, you know, with body language between multiple people, I think is really interesting. And that was what we talked about.
Even before I'd seen the film, I did a lot of reading about this character in this film and your performance. And so many people have compared you and your performance to Sigourney Weaver as Ripley in Alien. What does that mean to you as an actress? I mean, that's
I
massive, I
mean,
would think.
yeah, she's just a legend. I think those things I've not really processed. I don't think I pay attention to
Okay.
those compliments because they're just too big to handle. I mean, obviously, literally like legend, you know, and I
Mhm.
think that that's just such a, it's just such a huge compliment. And I think it's amazing that we get to do something that people feel that way about. You know, I think that that speaks to how much we cared for this character in this movie,
Mhm.
because we worked really hard on it, and a lot of, you know, a lot of people worked really hard and cared about all of the details. And I think that I'm glad that that translates. You know, I'm glad that people can receive what all the care and, I think, detail that we put into telling this story, however, you know, however that they interpret it or it comes off to them. I think that that doesn't go unnoticed, which is really cool.
Dan, one of the things that I love, a little bit picking up on that, one of the things I love about this film, and it is evident the care that you put into it, because I think other directors may have just gone straight to the action of the predator just massacring people left and right, right? But you do spend quite a bit of time exploring different avenues of prey, different types of prey. You know, from the snake to the rat to the coyote to the rabbit, all kinds of nature going on there. What were you trying to work out with that relationship with nature and exploring those relationships of prey there?
It really was twofold. One, the literal like basics of the predator is a trophy hunter, and that needs to be articulated to the audience. But then also, the movie in my mind was always very much an examination of like what strength is. And this is someone who's trying to prove herself to others and herself. And in the beginning, I've always felt like what her mom is instilling in her is something that she's rejecting, and she's saying, "I don't think that's going to make me a stronger person. That this other thing that I want to do, that's what's going to do it." And by the end of the movie, it's only her. And by the way, and her mom says, "I don't think you can do it." Her brother says, "I don't think you can do it." Everyone else in her band says, "I don't think you can do it." And then she goes out there, and here's the thing that is the ultimate, I'm looking for the best, and it sizes her up and says, "I don't think you're it either," and doesn't even bother with her, so the ultimate rejection. But in the end, it's her embracing what her mom gave her. It's not her saying what mom told me is bad and I'm going to become like what my dad wanted me to be or my brother is or whatever. It's her embracing all things that make her the strongest person. So we really needed to put the movie in that context of like what the natural hierarchy tends to be, or what is, or what's seen as alpha, and make sure that the movie's examining and the audience is like in that mindset of like, oh yeah, right, the chain. And so that's wherever we could, we put in those bits.
I love them so much. The thing that that frightened me the most in the film was not anything with the predator. It was the skin snake that all of a sudden just twitches or whatever it does. I jumped up and I walked away from the screen. I hate snakes.
Oh,
so that
well,
was that. Yeah.
I recommend you do not look up the video that we saw because I think it was Jane, one producer of the movie, Jane Myers. She had mentioned something about snakes after you kill them are still alive, and there was this video that we saw of a snake that in like a kitchen table with a group of people that starts wiggling around. I was horrifying, and we're like, that's in the movie somehow. And so but just to calm your fears, next time you see it, you can just imagine a guy just to the right with like a pump, like a bike pump, like putting air in it, and that's what's making the prop wiggle around.
They didn't tell me the first time that I saw it. I walked out because there's so much cool stuff on the movie that I'd see something and be like, "Oh my gosh, cool!"
That. Yeah, that was a planned thing. Yeah, did it scare you?
You don't remember?
You yelped or something? Yeah.
Yes, I walked out because that was one of the nights that we had the torches.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I walked up to it with my little torch, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool!" And I was crouching down, and they moved it, and everybody was watching, and the guys were hiding in the bushes, and it jumped up at me, and I screamed and I jumped back, and I think I fell because I was already down.
Backwards,
I fell backwards, and you were like, "Really?"
But you were somewhat tough. I remember it wasn't. Was it what I wanted it?
Oh.
To be, because
it wasn't as bad as you would hope.
It's probably in the movie. Because we wanted to use the best take of you being afraid, right?
So it would have been. Record it?
I think that would have been the whole plan.
There you go.
Okay, I thought that
it's so long ago.
I thought that it had been. I thought that I got more scared than you had expected.
That would be great. I hope that's true. I hope that's true.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
I want to dive for just a second into the climactic fight at the end between Noru and the predator. Both of you have very different experiences from that sequence. Talk to me about working all of that out and bringing that to film.
Oh wait, can we first just commend your pronunciation of not you're probably saying it more right than anyone's ever said it. And
thank you.
No one has ever pronounced it with a D because of how it's written and what we expect. But you're killing it. So thank you for getting the name right. Sorry. So the end fight. What
staging? How did you guys work out that between director and actress?
Well, I learned it over only a couple lunch breaks. That's a running joke that we we have. I had gaslit myself into thinking that I learned the longest fight that I prepared for over only 2 lunch breaks. And then Dan, I said that in a bunch of interviews, and then Dan was like, "By the way, you know that's not true,
Yeah.
right?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" So no,
But no,
I
the
mean,
end one, but the end one,
the
it
end one actually
was,
was
yeah,
good.
the end one we had only a principal photography we'd only gotten pieces of.
Yeah.
And so for a long time there were a lot of black in friends and family screenings and what have you, lots of black cards that said fight, Nadu sees the this and then does this. And so we had all this set up and had the finale in the pit, but not a lot of the when she gets the combi stick. And it was, I mean, we also went back and peppered in some of the, like, her setting the sticks on the tree, embracing some of what we saw in the original movie of like the preparation for the fight. And the initial stages of the choreography, that wasn't there. It was just, now she goes ham, you know. And it was a little bit of a lesson after our first cut of like, oh no, we want to enjoy that mode, and see her clever, that she's devising something, and it also kind of harkens back to what Dutch does, what Arnold's character does in the original Predator. And then really embracing very clear, legible choreography that I'm a big fan of, and getting us to that lovely face-off moment where he's pushing the shield down, and a profile of him roaring in her face and her grabbing the mandible. That one of the most exciting things to me was like, we've seen these mandibles are such an iconic feature of this character, and for her to use that against it, and ripping that, you know, because they always do look a little fragile, you know. It's like, you might be able to. So I thought that was so rad. And then of course my favorite moment of the movie, every time I've seen it, and certainly a lot of the movie I've seen so many times and I get a little bored watching, or, you know, restless. But her war cry at the end, is, I know I'm telling myself, I wonder if I'll feel it again. And every single time, because it's not, you know, I'll tell you why. This is like the highest compliment I can give you, because it's not a concept thing. That moment is not awesome because of the idea of it. Whereas sometimes you see other bits of a movie, whether it be dialogue or action choreography, any of it, where like the concept is cool and it's executed to portray the concept behind the idea behind that emotion, whatever it is. But that war cry is like pure human emotion that's in a mode that we don't often go to ourselves or see on screen, but we recognize it as like, and it's because it's a release. I remember I kept on bringing up, maybe annoyingly, Tom Hanks in Captain Phillips, where it's like that whole movie he finally lets loose in a way that you hadn't seen, only at the end. And that's what that beat delivers to me. So yeah, that was my favorite bit of the whole fight, is actually just her work right at the end.
I would say something similar, that I think so much of that fight really lived in, especially for our conversations, lived in the Naru's preparation for the fight. I think that so much of it was about like, well, what has gotten her to this moment, because that's her story, right? That's her journey, is like feeling so sure of herself externally, and then having these moments where she goes like, I don't know if I can do that, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here, and kind of walking that line, and then you know, at some point she crosses this boundary that is just, I think, that she then becomes fearless and kind of is really unquestionably gonna like look this thing in the face, and like have that fight, and there's like I think there's kind of a change. And so that, I think, was a lot of what we talked about, in terms of like, it was more about her getting there and her decisions, and then what that version of her is like. And then the actual fight was just a lot of choreography, and like a lot of like hurdles, like a lot of like physical daily hurdles of like, oh, it's nighttime, or I had a cold and we had to do it in reshoots and stuff, like, you know, it's a lot of like those types of things.
I feel like you had worse than a cold doing it, but you know,
not COVID.
Yeah. You know, it strikes me, something that I don't know that I've given you enough credit for, or get enough credit for, whatever, is this isn't a clean, this movie is not zero to hero, which would be a very clean thing to portray. And it's also not John Wick, I'm a badass and I'm just unleashing. which would be a
Right.
very clean thing to portray. Constantly, we're watching a character that we're like, oh, she is skilled, but not quite, and she doesn't have
Correct.
it. And she does have it. Very hard to pitch that. Very hard to get people on board because it's so not a clean thing. And it really comes down to the portrayal. How are we going, and without words, going to understand a level of competence that she has that is certainly beyond my means or any normal regular person's means, but also feel like, but that's an underdog, that's someone who hasn't quite accomplished what they're able to eventually get to, and inside fight sequences being able to feel like I'm sure of myself but I'm not sure of myself, and the things that reel up a fight or that make things so much more rootable is seeing someone question or things go wrong for them. So even when we're unleashing and seeing her at her truest potential, we also still feel the stakes and feel the peril and care for her. And all that comes down to I can't do anything cinematically. I mean, I can do some things, but I can't do that much with movie craft to get there. It really comes heavily down to the way she's portraying things. So,
thanks.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's only occurring to me now, but
Only 2 years later.
Yeah.
And then you leave us with you leave us with 3 ships coming back to Earth in the closing credits, which is not fair because she's not ready for that fight, I don't think. But
Or maybe she is.
Or maybe she is.
we'll see.
Or maybe it's not a fight. Maybe, who knows what that's going to be.
Maybe they crash land. Last thing I have to say, it's not really a question. A thank you to both of you for not killing the dog. Thank you. Thank you. I was waiting, crossing my fingers. I'm like, this dog cannot die. This dog cannot die. They have such a great bond. Thank you for everything. Thank you for the
take
interview.
me for a fool? Do you not? Do you really think I haven't learned the lessons that filmmakers past? I know you do not kill the dog.
Do not kill the dog.
That wasn't up to me, but I'll take the credit.
Well, thank you so much for the time. This was a fantastic interview. I'm so glad that we got to do it together with both of you there in the room. It was really great.
Awesome.
Only one ever.
There we go. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
All right, cool. Take care.
Bye.